Okay, so next slide, please. All right, we are a nationwide consulting firm. We're providing government proposal writing and strategy services to various types of entities, including small businesses, incubators, universities, nonprofit, local government agencies, municipalities, cooperatives, and all sorts of different entities. Our mission is to accelerate technology research, development, demonstration, and deployment through government funding. And while doing that, we want to maximize the positive impact to communities. We offer several services. We help write proposals. We help train organizations around navigating government funding and writing robust proposals. Help with grant prospecting, which is being able to identify opportunities for government funding and building roadmaps. We help manage grants, help with community benefits planning and community engagement strategies. And finally, we are helping small businesses that are developing innovative technologies to commercialize their technologies and take them from prototype to products. Next slide. I'm going to introduce our first speaker for today. Jasmine Markanday is an expert in federal grants management, specializing in 2 CFR 200 compliance and indirect cost rate negotiations. She has over 20 years of experience serving nonprofits, higher education, and utilities. A frequent speaker and trainer, Jasmine brings a wealth of knowledge in grant readiness, financial management, and post-award activities. Jasmine, the floor is yours.
Thank you a lot. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today and present on Davis-Bacon. And this is the agenda for today we have. And I know there will be time for questions, but we'll discuss the key elements of compliance, mostly how that relates to grants and grants management and the contracts that you issue. What are some of the common audit findings? And what can you do to ensure that you are in compliant with Davis-Bacon and just the grant reporting for your subrecipients and contractors? And just here, what we have is just the compliance part of the Davis-Bacon. So, the code requires the contract clauses to be in the grant contracts, and then the withholding information, having the records and certified payrolls, equal opportunity employer, apprentices, and then definitely compliance with the Copeland Act requirements and the subcontracts that you issue, and how you want to make sure like you have all the clauses and everything written in it, so the subrecipients and subcontractors do know what they're supposed to be doing and their roles and responsibilities. And when you're issuing the contracts, making sure the debarment and suspension part, and also ensuring the Davis-Bacon compliance for the related acts, not just the Davis-Bacon. And if there's any disputes that arise based on this project, you want to make sure you have something in there to ensure how they will be resolved. And the certification of eligibility, federal funding needs to go to the individuals who can actually really handle the grants, or there is no, they're not debarred in the system. So want to make sure that when you are giving away the contracts, there's no conflict of interest, and the contractors or subrecipients that you have, they are allowed to do work business with the federal government. And you would check that on sam.gov for that. So talking about when you do have a contract that you need to give away for a project on a construction, these are the requirements that you would need to ensure you have in the contract. So the Davis-Bacon labor standard clauses, especially with the grants management part, the 2 CFR comes in very handy, because that is the grants guidance you would need to comply with. That talks about that if you have a threshold that's over the simplified acquisition, which is 250,000 at this time, you would need to add all of the administrative, contractual, or legal remedies of breach of the contract. And if the contracts are over 10,000, you need to make sure you address the termination for cause and for convenience as well.
But I'm like, I can look in the window.
To ensure
Like,
the
I think I recognize that haircut.
equal employment opportunity, and then the Copeland Anti-Kickback Acts, and especially the Contract Work Hours and Safety Standards, Fair Labor Standards
It's,
Act,
somebody
and the right to inventions made under a
thing,
contract,
Davis-Bacon.
Clean Air Act, and debarment and suspension, like we
it
discussed,
started
that is a
and he sent
huge.
me the things.
Hey, Melanie,
I
can
think
you
somebody
mute
has,
yourself?
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
okay, we need to talk sometime.
We do. And
Let me see if I can mute them here.
Either go to Melanie's.
Yeah, I think it's Melanie, if you can mute her.
Yes.
Because I said, you and we're gonna be bored because we're probably gonna talk some more stuff. And Mike goes, yeah, I said, you need to do that with you too.
I think I don't see
So,
her on
Well, I
my,
hope to get it worked out.
yeah, I don't think I see it on my thing here.
No.
See if I can.
The thing
If you
that
go to,
bothers
if you go to
me is
participants,
I believe
you
she's
should be
lying.
able to hover over Melanie's name.
I believe you're probably right. And
Okay, yeah,
this
I
isn't the first time that
think since I'm on
something is
the
like, you know,
presenter
like,
screen.
there is no way. And
Oh,
that-
okay,
Green
here we go.
screen.
All right, I got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Sorry about that. Thank you for your patience. So looking at the debarment and suspension, that is a big part because you shouldn't be having doing business or giving out contracts to individuals who are debarred from the government. And usually if they're debarred, that means there were violations that had happened, and that is the reason they're part of that list. And that is mostly there for about 3 years, and it could be there longer. And then also the bird anti-lopping agreement, you would need to ensure that clauses are included there as well. So as it relates to the grants management compliance, we are going to look at these 5 key elements, talking about policies and procedures and training, identification, procurement part, how that relates to it, and the records management and the compliance assurance. So looking at policies and procedures, I feel like that is going to be a huge part of how your compliance will turn out. And as an organization, what your internal controls and that data, like the financial reports for your audit, how that turns out to be part of your organization. So when we say policies and procedures, if you have federal grants, there are required policies you need to have in place, such as like written procedure for financial management, procedure on how do you award contracts, you know, having that language in contracts. What is the, maybe you have a template of something that is showing you, okay, if we get Davis-Bacon, here's the procedure for following that or starting that, initiating the contracts. And looking at that, you would also want to ensure your staff is being trained, whether it's your project managers, the payroll individuals who are doing the payroll, even the employees, whether it is training them to ensure the timekeeping records are correct, especially as you know, we don't want to go back and have that paid back wages and things like that. So you want to make sure that training is given to your staff to ensure whether it's employees or the management in any of those areas. And then with policies and procedures, policies, you've got to have all of those ensure based on federal grants and the terms and conditions of the contract that you have either been awarded or pass it down to your subcontracts, as it ties into, because as it ties all of this to you being liable for everything. So if you have received, or you're the prime contractor, you are liable for the subcontractor and the lower tier subcontractor. So you want to ensure that you have your policies and procedure in place, and whether it's centralized so your employees know where to get it, or it's housed somewhere that they are aware of it, because that's going to help you strengthen your internal controls. And looking at identification, we're talking about here is the contractor versus subrecipient. You know, how do you determine that? Based on 2 CFR, they really, it doesn't matter about the language, but so much they care about what the project is going to do. So let's say even if somebody is supposed to be a subrecipient, but you choose them as a contractor, that's fine. But the compliance for Davis-Bacon and all the compliance that we talked about, the related acts, that is still going to apply on that. So you want to ensure that you have that identified, and also that roles and responsibilities do need to flow down from you. So whatever is applicable to you as a prime recipient, the same goes for everybody who is going to be receiving subcontracts through you. And it is your responsibility to ensure the compliance of your subrecipients and contractors. So they will be you would be the one asking for like the reports, how often you want them, whether it's on, weekly, which is payroll, but what other reports that you need to ensure you have in place as part of the terms and conditions of the grant, so the project is successful. And looking at procurement, giving out bids to individuals, making sure there's no conflict of interest, you're following the procurement standards, whether it needs to be a sealed bid, whether it's a informal method or formal, depending on the project it is, you would need to ensure the procurement policies are being followed that are based on grants. And let's say if your policies as an organization are more restrictive than the federal government, then the more restrictive would apply to those projects and contracts. And looking at the records management, that is a huge part of how you have everything for the grant or the project. So Davis-Bacon, you do have to manage those records for 3 additional years once the prime recipient has completed the project. So, whether it is done or uploaded electronically, or whether you have still, paper files, what that might be. And you want to make sure you have those records which are complete, which are accurate, and they're all there. And now that we are transferring or using technology, ensure that the records that have been uploaded, somebody is going in and verifying those to ensure the whole backup is there. We have seen in some agencies where they have uploaded the data and they have got rid of their paper hard files, but that data didn't transfer, whether it was highlighted wrong or somebody had made notes on. So anything like that, if it's not there, the auditor is basically going to say that the data doesn't exist. So you want to ensure that somebody is going there verifying that data and the backup is there for all those projects and invoices. And looking at compliance and assurance, there are quite a bit, things as a compliance you want to do, ensure like it is happening, and looking at like your policies and procedures and identifying that, and making sure that the procurement processes are being followed, or all of any of that information as it ties to the compliance. You want to ensure that you're doing random testing, maybe internal audits, to ensure things are processing right, or like whatever procedures you have, those are correct. And when you are requesting information from those subrecipients or contractors, making sure you are checking on them to see they are doing what they're supposed to be. So whether it is, looking at their audit, and also the federal government wants to ensure, like when you are looking at those subrecipients or contractors, you have that, contractor integrity. You want to make sure you're giving out to those individuals who have the financial capability to actually manage those grants and projects, that they will have, they want to know, like they will be able to complete that project, or will be fine with the accountability piece of it and the transparency. But if, on your end, you think that some subcontractor is not going to meet that, then you don't want to award that contract to them, because eventually you are the one who's going to be liable for that if there's any violations down the road. Okay. This is just looking at the Davis-Bacon Act violations within the US, and most of them, I mean, it's all over, but the more the orange, that is just saying that that is up to the 2 million of the violations. So talking about what does compliance looks like and non-compliance looks like. So with Davis-Bacon, you want to ensure, you know, the timely submission of SF 1413 reports, understanding and identifying what is a work site, maintaining accurate records for hours worked, and that is essential, like whether it needs the, you know, employees need to be trained on that if they, you know, if you find some discrepancies that they are not accurate. And the statement of compliance, which is certifying the weekly payroll, because the individual who's doing the payroll, they usually have firsthand knowledge of the payroll, looking at all the information from the payroll system. And that payroll is due no later than 1 week after each weekly date. So those are the required compliance that you need to follow if you have contracts that follow Davis-Bacon. And the other one is like making sure when you are doing compliance checks, you're doing job site visits, interviews, reviewing the payroll records, and that can be random. That can be based on how you, whatever kind of contract it is and how the procedure is set for the subcontractor. And the non-compliance, mostly what we have seen is the failure to account for fringe benefits and not posting the wage determinations at worksite. And the biggest one is misclassifying workers and paying them below prevailing wages. And then delayed certified payroll, and such as overtime, that is a big one too. Missing signatures on the payroll reports because they are not then being certified. So you want to ensure they are complete. And of course, the compliance that flows from top to bottom. So you need to ensure, like, I think the easiest way to remember this is like whatever, you are the prime recipient to those subcontractors. So you need to ensure you tell them everything they need to know to be compliant on the contract. So whether it is, you know, they need technical assistance, they need training, maybe you have to help them make job aids so they can understand what needs to be happened, because it is your responsibility. And checking the department list, sometimes there have been individuals who may have received funding, but they are on department list. And you know, how do you ensure that somebody's not on the list of being excluded? Well, you check that on sam.gov, and it's not necessarily you just go to sam.gov and check and do a search and you say, okay, they're not there, I'm good to. You would have to take a screenshot of that check you did and then save that as a backup, because if you don't save a copy of that screenshot or have some document that that procedure was done, you will be non-compliant. So you want to avoid that and ensure that somebody is going in checking that before the contracts are awarded. And if somebody who's working with you like for a long term, then you would want to do those checks annually, because things can change. This is one of my favorites, internal controls. These are some of the best practices we say you have within your agency or organization. Segregation of duties, yes, for sure. Like we don't want same two people running, or you know, one person doing all the things that fall in within the payroll or certifying that information. You want to have different people doing different jobs. And sometimes, you know, when you have auditors there, they will ask you to walk through those processes. So maybe once in a while during the year, you know, whatever procedures you have written down, have your employees follow that and see if there's any changes you need to make or updates you need to make, or if that procedure is still, needs to be updated, or if it's still the same, or you're doing things differently now, especially with the remote work and after COVID. So you want to ensure that. And instead of manual, use of certified payroll systems, so there's a less chance of human error. That would be a great start. And also, I know the regular audits, just auditing the payrolls, just maybe you do some random testing, or depending on how you check, those need to be part of that too. And training and education, again, not stress highly enough on that, because if you invest in the employees, your internal controls going to be strong, because they understand the process, they understand the procedure a lot better than just knowing or not being trained on it. And then having the written policies and procedures. We do recommend that if you have written policies and procedures, make sure you implement them. It's not just about, having the policies and procedures in place just to do a check mark and say, yes, we have those, but actually training your staff and employees on those procedures and policies, and what does that mean when it comes to compliance for your agency. So talking about audit and internal controls, as you look at your organizations, see if you're audit ready for Davis-Bacon. So what does that look like? You want to make sure you have certified payroll records, and they are, there's wage determinations and the workers are classified correctly. You have all the contract documentation that needs to serve as a backup. And you have the time cards and the payroll records. And, the last one is that, you want to make sure it's documented, and cannot stress enough on that, because we have seen a lot of time that this could be an area where you are dinged at. So, making sure that you're audit ready for that, to ensure everything is there once the agency, either, Department of Labor or your own auditors come to audit you, or you're auditing the subrecipients, because that documentation throughout those layers, the prime recipient, contractor, subrecipient, they need to have maintained that documentation. So that needs to be plus available for another 3 years after the prime recipient is closed the project. So you want to make sure that it's there and it's everything is in control. Just looking at the common audit findings, there are some here, which is some, they fail to submit an accurate or timely payroll reports, which are certified. This one is huge too, like the indirect, not having a correct wage determination. So either they're, underpaid, or they're non-compliant. And sometimes even on the overtime, that's not determined, or that's not added into their payroll. Individuals are misclassified because they're looking at more on the job titles rather than the job description. So when you are classifying these individuals based on the Davis-Bacon Act, you want to look at what their actual roles and responsibility is, not just their job title. And having poor internal controls, for sure, like this, if the staff is not trained, there could be a lot of issues in ineffective communication. So making sure the management takes their time to, bring that information to them. If somebody needs training, do that training. And especially on internal controls, it could be maybe, the 2 CFR is changing as of October 1. So maybe it's just an email to your employees that's saying, okay, here's the updates that's happening, because that will still count as part of your training. It doesn't necessarily needs to be where you're bringing everybody together and it needs to be a big deal, but, just finding that time throughout the year to just share tidbits of information can be very helpful. Could be shared during staff meetings, any of that, or also one other thing we do recommend is having a centralized information or like a web page where staff can go and check and say, okay, this is the compliance requirements for, all of your grants, all of the Davis-Bacon contracts and things. So it's all centralized and accessible. The other one is the incomplete payroll, which there's lack of hours worked and overtime, and it's not correct. So, just making sure that you go through those and have everything ready would be great. Here are some of the effective compliance strategies. So what can you do to ensure, like, if we have some of these findings and or like we are not there fully yet, or maybe you don't have that system in place, what can you do? LCP tracker, compliance software. And if you have the Department of Energy or EPA's grant, the GRIP, you have that free to use, so make sure you're taking advantage of that. But QuickBooks, ADP, payroll, EMARS, all of them have that capacity to ensure that payroll is in compliance, so you want to make sure you use that. And then the wage determination, sam.gov, and also the Department of Labor database, it has that. And then workers classification, that you definitely should have a written procedure to classify how workers based on actual duties, not just job titles. And when we first talked about Davis-Bacon, making sure have that contract clauses in the contract to make sure they're all listed there, and then not just listed there, that the contractors and subrecipients, they do understand that. And maybe they will need a training, or maybe you would have to do a technical training just to go over the contract so they understand, because that is your big role to ensure you flow that information down to them. Payroll auditing, you've got to conduct regular audits to ensure there's no errors, because if you do have a something that's coded incorrectly, then you can correct that immediately instead of just not waiting to do that. Or there will be times when you might have a misclassified something or have done something wrong, which is fine, but like you want to make sure that is corrected in a timely manner. And using the subcontractor management system, especially like Textura or custom build systems, they can help mostly with the subcontractor compliance. And they even have like dashboards where you can get the information in real time. Let's see. The next one, we are continuing with the effective compliance strategies. Training contractors. Yes, I think that is one of the biggest things within the Davis-Bacon, because so much information is flowing down. So you have, as a prime recipient, you're getting the information for Department of Labor or the federal government where your contract is from. Then you're sharing that with your subrecipient, and then they might be sharing that with their contractors. So it passes it down so much. You want to make sure everybody is trained. They understand what the guidance is. They understand what rules to follow, whether it's the grants to CFR or whatever the compliance needs to be, and check for debarment. Any construction project, that exceeds $2,000, I would say just assume that Davis-Bacon will apply. So and educating the project managers, payroll staff, contractors, what wage determination is and what are the reporting requirements. And it could be that when you receive a federal project, you bring everybody in who's going to be working on that grant or project maybe, bring everybody in one room and just do a kickoff meeting or a training where you go over all the compliance part and, use that, and then you can use that to help train your subrecipients and contractors. Just talking about the compliance part again, how do we ensure compliance with subrecipients? So, or subcontractors. So, as a prime recipient, you are doing everything because, you were working with the federal government, you've had these big grants before, what it needs to be. But like there could be a contractor who's kind of new or, been awarded this contract now. How do you ensure their compliance? So, maybe you do a pre-bid conference to explain requirements. That's just like having a checklist of going over the procurement standards, going over the pre-bid or the grants compliance of it, the payroll, just going through the checklist and asking who do they have as a person, somebody they can contact within your agency, and making sure all of that is tied within. And also requiring the subcontractor to ensure like they understand that Davis-Bacon applies and they sign something, or maybe it's their contract, which they will, but also certifying that they understand what that is and what that compliance is and where that is online also within their contract. And mandates the submission of weekly certified payroll reports, providing training and technical assistance, definitely doing the on-site interviews and regular monitoring. It could be, talking to the staff and establishing regular audits of payroll records and the workers' classifications. What are the penalties? What if a contractor is not in compliant and you have tried to help them get back on track, or like ensure they understand everything, you've done the trainings, what do you do then? Well, at a certain point, if they're not doing what they're supposed to, you may have to just pull the contract, and they may not be able to work with you until they have all that they need in control for compliance for grant. That just means they're not grant ready or to handle that project, because eventually it is going to cause you problems as a prime recipient, that you could be debarred because the agency is looking down how information is flowed down. So if you keep giving that contractor, leeway or keep chances, that is going to be a problem for your own federal grants and the compliance, and you'll be on the debarred list. And yes, ensuring the clear lines of communications, for sure, like talking to your program officer, if you as a prime recipient needs information, connecting with them and getting the information and passing it down. If there's any reporting concerns or somebody doesn't know when the reports are due, making sure you have that conversation with them. And then collaborate with the primary contractor for monitoring lower tier subcontractors. Yeah, like as a prime, that's your responsibility to ensure all the way down to the lower tier subcontractors, they understand what the guidelines are. And here is some of the essential software tools for compliance, LCP Tracker, Textura, Custom Solutions, EMARS, eComply, Elation Systems. What I think I've seen mostly use is the LCP Tracker and EMARS, but I know the agencies, everybody use what they like. So, but LCP Tracker, like I said, it is free now if you have the federal government EPA grant, so you can use that, and that is listed as well here. Talking about the procurement and the, what are the best methods, and under Davis-Bacon. So looking at the, we say clear identification of public works and job sites. So you want to know what exactly is identified in there to ensure what that job site is or the work site is. And then including in all of your procurement documents, the Davis-Bacon provisions, if there's any misconduct or suspension, debarment, penalties, sanction, we need to make sure all of that is listed. So after the contract happens, there's no like guessing or what we're supposed to be doing. So you want to ensure all of that is there. And applying procedures when awarding subcontracts and subrecipient agreements. So, looking at that, following that procedure onto what that procurement looks like, whoever that might be going down to, you want to ensure that you have all of that information that is consistent, that you use within your agency, and you have the policies and procedures as to what that looks like based on your organization and the grants guidance, which is a 2 CFR, plus the guidance for the Davis-Bacon. And sometimes it also depends on what federal agency has funded the grant or where the money is coming from, because additionally, they might have their own requirements just by the federal agency that you would need to follow. Talking about records management, I know we talked a little bit about earlier what like 3 years and what all needs to be stored. But here we just kind of go over that one more time. What does the effective records looks like? So making sure they are secured with limited access, because if you look at the payroll system, they do have a lot of, the personal information on it, the social security number, name, address. So we want to make sure not everybody has access to that. And how do you prevent that personal information, looking at that, also, but you have segregation of duties, but that just means it's just limited. Only people who need to see it need to know that how to reach that backup. And include the personal identifiable information and the job site interviews and the certified payroll reports. All that need to be saved. And then setting a proper retention schedule and disposal. If the guidelines say keep for 3 years, we would keep it for 3 years. You don't want to keep it for 4 years unless that's your organizational policy, which might be more restrictive. Some could be like 4, some could be 5, because you might be audited for some grant, but you still have the old grant, which you were supposed to get rid of after 3 years, but now the auditors might have access to that grant as well. So you want to make sure you get rid of things that you don't need, or they have, their schedule is over. And ensure subrecipients store records according to retention requirements. So yeah, as we talked about the flow down of information, we want to make sure the subrecipients know what they need to keep and what their record retention policy looks like, so they are aware of that as well. So, as compliance, this is a lot. There's a lot of things, you have to do based on Davis-Bacon, the funding agency or the contracting agency who has given you the grant, plus the grants guidance, which is 2 CFR, and it could be another your policies and procedures as well. But this is what we see mostly, some of the commonly outsourced compliance tasks, payroll and wage verification. Definitely the policies and procedures manual, because that is a lot of, the contract provisions and the grants guidance based on what that means to you. If it's, procurement standards or compliance or audit, what does that look like? So there's been where we have in the whole policies and procedures for the organization. And the employee classification and the fringe benefit management, compliance monitoring and reporting, audit preparation, where we just come in and say, okay, this is what they're going to be testing you on based on the grants you have, and then just kind of do like not a mini audit, but just making sure you've got all your ducks in a row, that you are ready when your audit is here. And training and technical assistance, whatever that looks like for your organization, what that needs are. Based on that, we can help with the training part, whether it needs to be one-on-one or, you know, for all your staff. And it could be where they just need to understand the grants compliance, or they need to understand what does that look like for the certified payroll reports. Any of that, we could help with that. And, you know, with Fedsprout, how do we help you with the compliance? You know, I think it's kind of a little repetitive, but the other one was like sharing what we have seen, but this is what we can also do, is develop policies and procedures and training. You know, wage determinations, subrecipient contractors, if you're not sure like how to determine that, procurement process for compliance, and implementing rigorous compliance assurance and prepare you for audits. That's pretty much it for today.